Leonard Brooks adjusted his tie as he walked through the polished halls of JFK Airport. He had just wrapped up one of the biggest meetings of his career, a multi-billion-dollar tech deal that would shape the next decade for his company. To anyone watching, he looked like an ordinary traveler dressed in a crisp gray suit and carrying a sleek black briefcase. Few would guess that he was the CEO of one of the fastest-growing software firms in America. He preferred it that way. Quiet power, not loud presence. As he reached the gate for Flight 712 to Los Angeles, Leonard smiled faintly. It had been a long week. All he wanted was to relax in his favorite seat, 1A, the front left corner of the aircraft, where he always sat when flying first class. He scanned his ticket, greeted the attendant politely, and stepped onto the plane. The cabin smelled faintly of coffee and citrus, the soft hum of air conditioning wrapping the space in calm. He placed his briefcase neatly under the seat, removed his watch, and closed his eyes. Then came the voice. "Excuse me, sir." Leonard looked up. A young flight attendant stood beside him, her expression polite but tense. "We have a little mix-up. This seat was actually reserved for another passenger, one of our elite platinum members. Could we ask you to move to 3C instead?" Leonard frowned slightly. "I'm sorry, but this is my assigned seat. It's right here on my ticket." The attendant hesitated, glancing toward the front of the cabin. A tall white man in his 30s stood there, wearing designer sunglasses and an arrogant smirk. "That's me," he said, his tone casual but dripping with entitlement. "Seat 1A is my usual spot." Leonard's jaw tightened. He had seen this before, too many times. The looks, the assumptions, the quiet disbelief that a black man in an expensive suit could belong in the same first-class space as men like that. Still, his voice stayed calm. "I understand, but I booked this weeks ago. It's not a mistake." The attendant's smile faltered. "Sir, it would make things easier if—" Before she could finish, an elderly woman across the aisle spoke up sharply. "Why should he move? He's already sitting in his seat." Her words sliced through the air. Several passengers turned their heads, the quiet tension thickening. The arrogant passenger chuckled softly, stepping closer. "Look, lady, I've got status with this airline. They always make room for me. It's no big deal. He can take another seat." Leonard turned his eyes toward him, steady and cold. It becomes a big deal when someone thinks they're more deserving just because of who they are, or what they look like. The attendant swallowed, caught between embarrassment and pressure. "Please, sir, we just need to resolve this quickly before boarding completes." Leonard leaned back, folding his arms. "Then resolve it the right way. I'm not moving." The air thickened with silence. A few whispers rippled through the cabin, some supportive, others uncomfortable. The young man rolled his eyes, muttering, "Unbelievable." Minutes passed. The flight attendant returned, now joined by a supervisor with a polished badge. "Mr. Brooks," he began, his tone official, "refusing to follow crew instructions may result in removal from the aircraft." Leonard's heart beat slower, not faster. Years of boardroom battles had taught him one thing: silence is power. He simply said, "If that's what you need to do, go ahead. But I paid for this seat, and I won't give it up because someone else thinks they deserve better." The older woman nodded firmly. "Good for you, young man." A ripple of quiet approval spread. Passengers murmured agreement. The arrogant man's face flushed. "You'll regret this," he hissed under his breath. Leonard looked out the window, voice low. "I doubt it." He didn't know yet that cameras were already recording, passengers whispering, posting online. Within hours, millions would see what was happening on Flight 712. But at that moment, he only knew one thing: he wasn't moving. He had fought too hard to reach this seat, literally and symbolically, and no one was going to take it away from him again. The plane doors were about to close when the tension finally snapped. The supervisor returned, this time with 2 ground staff in tow. Their faces carried the stiff professionalism of people sent to handle a situation. Passengers fell silent as the uniformed staff stopped by Leonard's seat. "Mr. Brooks," the supervisor said firmly, "this is your final warning. If you do not comply and move seats, we'll have to deboard you." Leonard's calm gaze didn't waver. "On what grounds?" My ticket, my boarding pass, and my payment all confirm this seat. What exactly am I doing wrong? The man's voice dropped slightly. We're following internal protocol, sir. This other passenger has priority seating privileges. A murmur rolled through first class. Someone muttered, priority doesn't mean stealing someone's seat. Another whispered, this is discrimination. Leonard folded his hands, his tone even but cutting. Protocol doesn't override decency. The younger man, the so-called elite passenger, smirked. Don't make this harder than it has to be, man. Just move. I've got important business in L.A. Leonard turned his head slowly. So do I. The flight attendant looked uneasy now. The phones were up. Half the first-class cabin had started recording. She tried to whisper, please, sir, for everyone's comfort. But the damage was done. The situation was no longer quiet or private. Every passenger could feel the weight of what was happening. A successful, well-dressed black man being told to move for a smug white traveler. It looked bad. It was bad. Leonard exhaled and glanced at the ceiling. Memories flooded back. Years ago, when he was just starting out, being ignored in meetings, kept over in rooms full of men who assumed he was an assistant or driver. That silent anger, the kind that stays under your skin for years, began to stir again. He stood up, not to leave, but to face them. If you want me off this plane, you'll have to explain to everyone watching why. The supervisor hesitated. The younger man scoffed. Oh, give me a break. You're making this a race thing? Leonard tilted his head slightly. I'm not making it anything. Your actions are doing that just fine. Someone in the back of first class clapped softly, and others nodded. The pressure shifted. The airline staff exchanged nervous looks. This wasn't supposed to spiral like this. Then came the announcement no one expected. Ladies and gentlemen, we are experiencing a short delay due to a seating issue in the first-class cabin. Gasps and murmurs spread. Leonard sat back down calmly while the young man shot him a glare sharp enough to cut glass. You're going to regret this. Leonard smiled faintly. Funny. I might talk to them first. But the attendants didn't realize who he was, not yet. To them, he was just another passenger being difficult. They didn't know that Leonard Brooks wasn't only a millionaire CEO, he was also one of the biggest clients their airline's parent company had. His software firm handled their entire data management system. The flight finally took off after a 20-minute delay, but the mood was cold. The elite flyer sat scowling 2 rows behind, forced into a different seat. The attendants moved stiffly through the aisles, avoiding eye contact with Leonard. Halfway through the flight, one of them returned, trying to offer an apology. Sir, I hope you understand we were just following orders. Leonard nodded politely. I understand, and I hope you'll understand that actions have consequences. She blinked, confused. Sir, I'll talk to corporate about you. Leonard smiled faintly. Funny, I might talk to them first. But the attendants didn't realize who he was, not yet. To them, he was just another passenger being difficult. They didn't know that Leonard Brooks wasn't only a millionaire CEO, he was also one of the biggest clients their airline's parent company had. His software firm handled their entire data management system. The flight finally took off after a 20-minute delay, but the mood was cold. The elite flyer sat scowling 2 rows behind, forced into a different seat. The attendants moved stiffly through the aisles, avoiding eye contact with Leonard. Halfway through the flight, one of them returned, trying to offer an apology. Sir, I hope you understand we were just following orders. Leonard nodded politely. I understand. And I hope you'll understand that actions have consequences. She blinked, confused. Sir? He simply looked back out the window. The clouds rolled beneath them, glowing gold under the sunset. In that silence, his mind wasn't on revenge, it was on justice. On every young man or woman who had been humiliated in silence because they lacked the power to speak up. By the time the plane landed in Los Angeles, Leonard's name was already trending. Someone had posted a clip online. Black passenger refuses to move for VIP flyer. Crew tries to remove him. The video was exploding with comments. Words like respect, discrimination, and karma filled the threads. As the cabin lights brightened for landing, Leonard stood, collected his briefcase, and looked once at the nervous crew. "Don't worry," he said softly. "I'm not angry, just disappointed." The younger man rolled his eyes again, whispering under his breath, "Whatever, you'll still be a nobody after this." Leonard smiled faintly as he adjusted his cufflinks. "We'll see." None of them realized that. The moment they stepped off that plane, their lives and their jobs were about to change forever. The next morning, sunlight streamed across the glass walls of Brightech Dynamics headquarters in Los Angeles. Leonard Brooks stepped out of his car, polished black shoes clicking softly on the marble entrance. His assistant, Rachel, hurried beside him, holding a tablet. "Sir, you're trending across every platform. The clip from the flight has over 15 million views in 12 hours. Hashtags about discrimination, VIP privilege, and justice are everywhere. Reporters are reaching out nonstop." Leonard nodded calmly. "Let them talk. Sometimes silence exposes more than shouting ever could." He walked into the elevator, his reflection catching the faintest trace of a smile. Today wasn't just any day. The airline whose staff had humiliated him was one of Brightech's biggest clients, and today they were coming to finalize a new digital infrastructure contract worth over $40 million. The same airline, the same name printed boldly on the meeting schedule, Aureus Airlines, executive review meeting with CEO Leonard Brooks. By 10 a.m., their representatives had arrived. Two senior executives, the same ground supervisor from the flight, and, ironically, the arrogant VIP passenger, whose real name was Derek Hale, a regional director for the airline's corporate relations department. He was clearly unaware of who Leonard truly was. Leonard entered the conference room dressed in a charcoal suit, his calm presence filling the room before he even spoke. "Good morning," he said evenly, his tone professional but distant. The Aureus team stood, shaking hands nervously. Derek froze, his face draining of color as realization dawned. "Wait, you're—" Leonard smiled faintly. "Yes, the man you asked to give up his seat." Silence crushed the room. The executives exchanged horror-eyed glances. The ground supervisor looked like he wanted to vanish. Leonard set his briefcase down and opened the meeting folder. "Before we proceed, I'd like to discuss an experience I had with your airline yesterday. I was ordered to move from my confirmed seat for another passenger. When I refused, I was threatened with removal." He slid a printed screenshot across the table. The viral video paused at the moment the supervisor stood over him. "This is now one of the top trending clips in the country." The older executive cleared his throat, his voice trembling. "Mr. Brooks, please understand this was a misunderstanding. Our staff—" Leonard interrupted quietly. "A misunderstanding doesn't threaten to deboard a paying customer. A misunderstanding doesn't humiliate someone in public because of how they look." Derek shifted uncomfortably. "Sir, I didn't mean—" Leonard turned his eyes on him, calm, steady, but sharp enough to pierce. "You didn't mean to what? To assume? To act entitled? To show the world exactly what kind of culture your company protects?" No one spoke. The air was heavy with shame. Leonard closed the folder. "Here's what will happen. Effective immediately, Brightech Dynamics is terminating all negotiations and contracts with Aureus Airlines. We will be pulling our software systems, customer analytics, and technical support services within 30 days. Gasps echoed around the table. One executive stammered, "Mr. Brooks, that will cripple our data operations. Please, we can fix this." Leonard stood, buttoning his coat. "Respect isn't something you fix after the damage. It's something you show before it's too late." He started toward the door, then paused. "Oh, and Derek, consider this your last official meeting under the Aureus name. You're terminated. Effective immediately." The young man's face went pale. "You can't." Leonard turned slightly. "Actually, I can. Brightech holds authority over your DP. Department's digital compliance contracts. You should have done your homework before demanding someone's seat." Rachel followed him out, leaving the stunned room in silence. As they stepped into the hallway, she whispered, "That was powerful, sir." Leonard smiled faintly. It wasn't revenge. It was accountability. By evening, the story had spread even further. Headlines read, "Black CEO fires airline executive after being discriminated against mid-flight." News anchors called it the most poetic instant karma moment of the year. Leonard watched the coverage quietly from his office window, city lights glittering below. His phone buzzed. An email from the airline's CEO personally apologizing, begging for reconsideration. He didn't respond. Instead, he sent one short message to his communications team. Prepare a press statement, one that says, "Respect everyone, regardless of their seat." Outside, the city glowed with evening life. Inside, Leonard leaned back, closing his eyes for the first time all day. The fight wasn't about a seat anymore, it was about dignity, and he had made sure the world would never forget that. By the next morning, the entire country was talking about Leonard Brooks. News channels replayed the viral footage every hour. Social media platforms flooded with hashtags. Hashtag respect everyone, #seat1A, #Leonard Brooks, and #instant karma. The clip of him sitting calmly while being told to move had become a symbol of quiet strength and dignity. Journalists called it the flight that taught America a lesson. Influencers, activists, and even celebrities began sharing it, praising how Leonard handled humiliation with class and restraint. Comment sections overflowed with support, millions admiring the man who stood his ground without shouting, who exposed arrogance simply by staying composed. Meanwhile, at the Aureus Airlines headquarters, chaos erupted. The public relations team scrambled to control the damage. Their stock price had dropped 7% overnight. Customers were canceling flights, demanding boycotts, and posting screenshots of Leonard's statement. "No seat, no title, and no privilege gives anyone the right to disrespect another human being." Inside the boardroom, the airline's CEO, a gray-haired executive named Richard Carman, sat with his head in his hands. "We built this company for 40 years, he muttered, "and one act of arrogance might destroy it." His deputy nodded nervously. "Sir, we've already terminated the crew involved and issued public apologies." Richard sighed heavily. "He hasn't responded, has he?" "No, sir, not a word." Richard leaned back, staring at the headline on the screen. "Black CEO fires entire negotiation team after discrimination incident." He whispered, "He's not angry. That's what scares me most." While the airline tried to recover, Leonard's office was calm. He didn't gloat, didn't seek revenge tours, didn't post emotional statements. He simply continued his work. But inside his company, employees felt a shift. His quiet leadership had inspired everyone, from interns to directors. That afternoon, Leonard called a company-wide meeting. As employees gathered in the auditorium, the hum of whispers filled the air. Cameras from media outlets were already waiting outside. Leonard stepped on stage, dressed in his usual simple navy suit, no notes, no teleprompter. He spoke with calm conviction. "Yesterday, something happened that wasn't new. It's something many people experience every day, being judged before being known. But I want everyone here to remember this. Power means nothing if it doesn't bring dignity with it." The crowd listened in silence. "I didn't stand my ground for pride," he continued. "I did it so that one day, someone else, maybe one of you, doesn't have to. Respect is the currency that never loses value." Applause erupted, echoing through the hall. Employees stood clapping until Leonard had to gesture for them to sit. "Let's not waste energy on revenge," he added. "Let's build companies, systems, and cultures where this doesn't happen again." Outside the hall, journalists waited eagerly, shouting questions as he exited. "Mr. Brooks, what do you think about Aureus Airlines' apology?" He paused for a moment, then said simply, "Apologies matter less than change. Let's see what they do next." That line hit every major headline by evening. News anchors called it the calmest storm in corporate history. The internet began labeling Leonard the gentleman CEO. Meanwhile, Derek Hale, the man who had demanded the seat, was living a nightmare. His phone wouldn't stop buzzing with messages of outrage and ridicule. His face, once smug, was now plastered across news outlets as the man who lost everything over arrogance. He had issued a late-night apology online, but no one cared. It was too late. One comment under his post summed it up best. He lost his seat, his job, and his respect, all in one flight. Across the city, Leonard received a call from an old mentor. "You handled that like a true leader, son," the older voice said warmly. "You didn't shout, you didn't threaten, you let your integrity speak louder than your words." Leonard smiled faintly. That's the only voice people really hear. Later that night, sitting alone in his office, he opened his laptop to an inbox full of letters. People sharing their stories of being overlooked, underestimated, or disrespected because of who they were. Some wrote from airports, others from workplaces or schools. Each one thanked him for giving them courage. He leaned back in his chair, eyes soft. "Maybe that seat wasn't just for me," he whispered. "Maybe it was for everyone who's ever been told to move." The city skyline shimmered outside his window, quiet and endless. For the first time in years, Leonard felt something deeper than victory. He felt purpose. Because sometimes changing the world doesn't start with a speech or a protest. It starts with one person refusing to give up their seat. A week passed and the storm only grew louder. News anchors still replayed the clip of Leonard sitting calmly, refusing to move. Documentaries, talk shows, and podcasts debated what his stand meant for equality in business and travel. The story had become bigger than a viral moment. It had turned into a global symbol of dignity and self-respect. Meanwhile, Leonard continued with his work as usual. He wasn't chasing headlines, and he wasn't interested in fame. To him, it was never about punishing anyone. It was about principle. But the world had chosen to make him the face of a movement. One afternoon, as Leonard prepared for a new investor meeting, Rachel walked into his office with an envelope. "Sir," she said softly, "a courier just dropped this off. It's from the CEO of Airlines." Leonard took it without emotion. The envelope bore the company's golden seal. Inside was a formal letter of apology, signed personally by Richard Carmen. Along with it was a printed resolution. Airlines was implementing a new global equality and respect training program for all employees named the Brooks Standard. He read it twice, silently. Then he set the letter down and said, "At least something good came from it." Rachel nodded. "Sir, that's not all. They're also inviting you to speak at their annual leadership summit next month." Leonard looked up, surprised. "Me? At their summit?" "Yes," she replied. "They want you to address their top executives and share your views on leadership, inclusion, and integrity." For a moment, Leonard said nothing. He thought back to that humiliating day on the plane, the whispers, the glares, the entitlement. And now, the same company wanted to hear from him. Fate had a sense of humor, but also justice. A few weeks later, Leonard stood backstage at the Aureus Global Summit in Chicago. Hundreds of executives filled the ballrooms. Cameras flashed. The same airline that once tried to remove him now waited for his words. The host introduced him respectfully. "Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Mr. Leonard Brooks, CEO of Brytech Dynamics, a leader who reminded the world what respect truly means." The applause thundered as he stepped on stage. He looked around calmly, then began, "It's strange being here. The last time I heard your company's name, it wasn't in a boardroom. It was in an airplane aisle." A ripple of nervous laughter moved through the audience. He continued, voice steady but powerful. "That day wasn't about a seat. It was about something much bigger. How we choose to see each other. Titles, wealth, or frequent flyer cards don't make anyone superior. What defines us is how we treat people when no one's watching." The hall fell silent. His tone carried a quiet conviction that commanded respect. "I didn't post the video. I didn't start the trend. The world reacted because deep down, everyone knows what it feels like to be underestimated. That's why this moment isn't about me. It's about us." He paused, scanning the room of humbled faces. "I don't need apologies. I need awareness. I don't need praise. I need progress." The audience stood up in unison, applause echoing through the hall. Some executives even wiped tears from their eyes. After the speech, Richard Carmen approached Leonard personally, shaking his hand with genuine humility. "You've done more to repair our company's soul than any crisis manager could," he said quietly. Leonard smiled. "Then let's make sure it stays repaired." From that day, the Brooks Standard became mandatory across all Aureus operations. Every new employee learned his story, not as a tale of shame, but as a lesson in accountability and respect. Back at Brightech, Leonard's team celebrated quietly. Emails poured in from universities and companies around the world inviting him to speak about ethical leadership. Yet Leonard stayed humble. "If I start believing I'm the hero," he told Rachel, "I'll become the very thing I stood against." One evening, as he left the office, he passed by a janitor polishing the floor. The man smiled shyly and said, "Sir, I saw your video. You made us all proud." Leonard stopped, smiled warmly, and said, "Thank you. But remember, pride isn't about power. It's about self-respect." Outside, the night sky stretched wide over the city, quiet, vast, and full of meaning. Leonard looked up and whispered to himself, "Sometimes justice doesn't shout. It just stands its ground." Months had passed since that flight, but the story of Leonard Brooks had not faded. Instead, it had evolved into something much greater, a living symbol of humility, courage, and quiet power. The world didn't just remember what happened on Flight 712. It remembered how it happened. No shouting, no revenge, no chaos. Just dignity standing its ground. Airlines across the country began reviewing their customer treatment policies. Corporate leaders quoted Leonard's words, "Respect is the currency that never loses value." Universities taught his story in leadership classes. Even in small towns, people referenced Seat 1A as a phrase meaning know your worth, don't surrender your dignity. Leonard never sought the fame that followed him, but he accepted its purpose. Each time someone thanked him, he replied the same way. "Don't thank me. Just stand up for yourself when it's your turn." One evening, nearly 6 months later, he was invited to speak at a global leadership summit in Geneva. Leaders from over 50 countries attended, curious to meet the man whose quiet defiance had inspired millions. As Leonard stood on stage wearing his usual navy suit, he began with the same calm tone the world had come to recognize. "Leadership," he said, "isn't about how many people obey you. It's about how many people you lift up." That day on the plane wasn't my fight alone. It was every person's fight who has ever been told, "You don't belong here," but you do. You always did. The crowd rose in applause before he even finished. Cameras flashed, but Leonard barely noticed. His eyes wandered toward the back of the hall, where a group of students waved small signs that read, "Respect everyone." One of them mouthed the words, "Thank you." After the speech, reporters crowded around him. "Mr. Brooks," one asked, "do you ever regret how things unfolded with the airline?" Leonard smiled faintly. "No, because sometimes a single uncomfortable truth can move 1,000 hearts toward change." Back in Los Angeles, Brightech Dynamics thrived. Leonard's company became known not just for its technology, but for its ethics. He made sure diversity and equality weren't slogans, they were structure. Every employee, from the front desk to the executive floor, was treated with the same level of respect he once fought for at 30,000 feet. One afternoon, Rachel entered his office holding a tablet. "Sir, you need to see this." On the screen was a live video of a young woman at an airport. She was being told her upgraded seat had been reassigned to someone more important. Calmly, she refused to move and quoted him word for word. "If respect can't fit in your policies need to change." The crowd around her applauded, and within hours, that video went viral too, captioned, "Seat 1A lives on." Leonard chuckled softly. "Looks like it's bigger than me now." Rachel smiled. "You started something that can't be stopped." That night, Leonard sat alone on his balcony, overlooking the glittering skyline. The city buzzed with noise, but he found peace in the silence. He thought about how life had come full circle, from a humiliating moment on a plane to a global movement about respect and equality. His phone buzzed, a text from the Aureus CEO, Richard Carmen. "We just named our new community scholarship after you, the Leonard Brooks Foundation for Ethical Leadership. It's helping students from underprivileged backgrounds get into aviation and tech careers." Leonard's eyes softened. He typed back simply, "Thank you. Keep making it matter." He leaned back, closing his eyes as the night wind brushed against his face. For the first time in a long time, he felt light, not because of revenge or victory, but because the story had found its ending in change. He whispered quietly, "Seat 1A wasn't just a seat. It was a reminder that no matter where you sit in life, respect must sit beside you." And with that, he smiled to himself, knowing that true power was never in control, but in character. The world would forget many headlines, many scandals, and many names. But the story of the man who stayed seated, with grace, courage, and calm, would live on forever.